yours as a long-standing Red Cross professional and volunteer, and now coming over to the Commission side. What would you hope and what would you expect to be a real legacy of the year in our sector, in the development and humanitarian sector? And what do you see coming, which would be a good thing to remember? That was 2011 that we started that, and it didn't stop there.
Thank you, Marcus. I was planning to talk about the way I see the humanitarian aid and development aid and how they overlap sometimes or how they are very different sometimes, based on my past experience and also based on what I'm doing now. However, as you put a few additional questions or issues, I will start with what you mentioned, and will leave most of the Red Cross stuff and experience to Leon, an old friend and buddy, so he will cover that. But first, I think it has been enormous effort by the team in Brussels and a number of colleagues from various NGOs that took part in this whole story, and I think the final result is good because we managed to identify a number of really serious issues that we are all facing, dealing with volunteerism in the context of what's going on today in the world. And I'm glad Malcolm mentioned some of these issues, including, as he said, the end receiver, I mean, as we say, the beneficiaries or people in need. I mean, we are here not just to debate volunteerism as a beautiful concept in the 21st century, which is fine, that's right. We do not forget that volunteerism is an act of free will that is absolutely fine, and any type of volunteering is essential and is important. However, we live in a world that is changing fast, which may and which does affect the way volunteerism is practiced and is experienced. And I will mention a few details a bit later. However, if we have to sum it up in few words, I mean, how we see the legacy of this year, what we have done, I think we not only identified a number of important issues, I think we measured the temperature of Europe and European volunteers. I think we found a sense of better direction, where we want to go, how we want to do things. We may have not agreed on a number of priorities, but at least we, I think, managed to identify the framework or the spot that we believe encapsulates the most important challenges today, humanitarian challenges, where the volunteers are needed. And we also agree that the European Commission in Brussels, with the volunteer organizations and the governments, should do something that is more predictable, better organized, more efficient, that will actually capture the enthusiasm, the knowledge, the skills, the talents of those 100 million European volunteers. That will make a difference based on actions, not on beautiful words and plans and papers and ideas and concepts, which is, again, they are okay, they are fine. I used to discuss this with my colleague Leon, that in many organizations, we still invest a lot of time in creating beautiful concepts. And this is correct, this is fine. However, the time is flying so fast, and the people in need are waiting for us to help them. And I'm glad Malcolm mentioned this, that at the end of the day, basically we'll be judged by what we have done, not by what we have created in our beautiful papers in Geneva, in New York, in Brussels, and elsewhere. So this is it. So I think the legacy of this year is that we started a process We triggered something that is very important. And as the Chinese say, the longest march starts with the first step. We have made the first step. Now, however, we have to see what we do next. How we transform all our debates, papers, concepts, ideas into action. Because we'll be judged by the beneficiaries, by what we have done, not by what we have said. So now I'm going back to my beautiful paper. I'm not going to go through it because it's, I think I sent it to the organizers. It's probably will be on the web. So what I want to do is to mention a couple of practical things, dealing with first humanitarian aid and then development aid. I believe that the future of this European voluntary corps is very important if we manage to create a machine that will combine the passion, the enthusiasm of the young or not so young volunteers with what people need, where the needs are. If you look at the context of today's Europe and today's world, in which we exist or debate the volunteerism today, I mean, you will see a mixture of unprecedented economic and financial crisis in Europe, a number of bleeding, small but dangerous conflicts in the world. You have huge number of young people unemployed. You have people without hopes. Yesterday, most of the TV networks spoke about HIV/AIDS because it was the International Day to fight HIV/AIDS. And we have 45 million people infected and probably 3 or 4 times more affected if you take into account the families that are taking care of these people. And if you look at the Red Cross or Red Crescent or MSF or other organizations, volunteers that work in Africa in terms of vaccinations, I mean, you will see them doing things. And today, with all due respect to endless forms of volunteering, people may ask, or if a journalist comes to Brussels, say, okay, what are your priorities? Where do you want to put those 100 million volunteers and their power and their talents? In which areas? What is most important to do? Or for the future volunteer corps, if we have 1,000 or 20,000 volunteers from Europe, where do we want to deploy them? In which areas? If you take the ever-growing number of natural disasters, technological disasters, the combination of those disasters with the climate change and social consequences, health consequences. Now, shall we plan for a number of volunteers to be identified, trained, and deployed in the field of disaster relief and disaster response? Probably yes. A number of organizations are doing it. But if you look at the World Disaster Report issued by the IFRC in Geneva, you will see that this is something that we are facing in not only in Africa and Asia, we're facing it in Europe. 100,000 Europeans died during the last 10 years because of the natural disasters, mainly summer heat and winter colds. 100,000 people for a continent that pretends to be the leading power in many areas. This is impressive. So what do we do about that? Then, if disaster response is something that many volunteers would like to invest their skills. Then what about nutrition? In many parts of Africa, food security is a problem. With the economic crisis, we have rising prices of food, and more people are having daily struggle to get at least one meal a day. So those volunteers who are working in Africa, feeding people, how we train them, and do we need to invest in this? If you go to other areas that deals with disaster and that deal with post-disaster, so how we actually encourage volunteers to go there and to do what is expected to be done. So this is about humanitarian aid. But when you take development, the other side, I mean, many lessons after the tsunami in 2004. But if there was disaster preparedness, if there was disaster prevention actions in many parts of Asia and in some parts of Africa, probably this almost 250,000 of people that were lost, probably many of them would have been saved. Why this was not done? So disaster prevention, disaster mitigation, creation of the culture of prevention is something that many volunteers would love to do. Now, the challenge for the future volunteer corps is how to capture those people who want to do this, how to train them and send them when they are needed. Here, I want to raise 3 other issues. One is the skills, the professionalism. I know that many colleagues believe that we should rely very much on their enthusiasm and passion, which is correct, that's fine. However, if you send a volunteer to run a refugee camp or to assist the ICRC in a conflict situation where volunteers are working in war zones, and you are responsible for the security of these people, and how we guarantee to the parents of those young volunteers to get the body bags, how we guarantee that these people will return back home safe and alive. Then coordination. We have discussed this hundreds of times in my past life, and I can tell you that coordinating volunteers is a costly and a difficult thing. And this is something that we may need to discuss in the future. How we coordinate our small armies of humanitarian workers. So how we avoid duplication, how we avoid wasting resources and talents. Then comes the issue of management. Managing volunteers is also something very, very demanding. So in the future, when we finally decide what type of a volunteer corps it will be, we have to decide also of the professional standards and management of these volunteers. So we have a lot of challenges ahead. That's why I believe we have started a long journey. First step was done, but we have much more to do. And I think in the near future, with all lessons learned in the future, listening to everyone, we will be able to create a highly efficient humanitarian army or elite of people who are not only big hearts, but actually these are people who know what they are doing in the field. And again, I can tell you that huge progress was made during the last 20, 25 years. I can tell you that there is nothing more dangerous in the field, in dramatic situations, nothing more dangerous than amateurish enthusiasts. I can tell you what happened in Yerevan in Armenia 20-something years ago when the earthquake killed 25,000 people, and when we had huge number of willing people but not knowing what they were doing. Result was, in several cases, catastrophic. Some of them, the enthusiasts, did more damage than they helped. And in contrast, during the war in Yugoslavia, I can tell you that Serbian volunteers, Croatian volunteers, Slovenian volunteers were so well prepared and so independent and so neutral that they managed to save thousands of lives. So it's really, in some occasions, it's really about professionalism, and it's really about high standards, because volunteers and we all will be judged by very high standards, and every mistake may result in human death. So this is something we have to avoid. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Encho. Thank you very much, and thank you also for opening already the